We know your secrets. Welcome to Dark Whispers TV.
The screaming started at 9:47 p.m., exactly 3 minutes after Sarah noticed the handprints on the outside of the car windows, handprints that were facing inward. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it all began 6 hours earlier when the 5 of us were still laughing. The desert stretched out before us like a vast ocean of rust and gold, the kind of emptiness that makes you feel both insignificant and strangely free. Our destination was Dead Man's Creek, a misleadingly green oasis tucked between two mesas about 40 miles outside of Redemption, Arizona. The name should have been our first warning, but we were 20-somethings drunk on freedom and the promise of a perfect afternoon. Dead Man's Creek got its name from a cattle rustler who died of thirst looking for it, Jake announced from the driver's seat of his beat-up Chevy Suburban, his cowboy hat tilted back in that way he thought made him look mysterious. Never found the water, even though it was right there. That's cheerful, muttered Rachel from the passenger seat, not looking up from her phone. She'd been trying to get signal for the last 20 minutes, her perfectly manicured nails tapping anxiously against the screen. I sat in the middle row next to Marcus, who had his sketchbook out, already drawing the landscape as it blurred past. Marcus was the quiet one, always observing, always capturing moments the rest of us missed. His charcoal-stained fingers moved across the page with practiced precision. Behind us, Sarah sprawled across the back seat, her red hair fanned out like a copper halo, country music humming from her earbuds. Sarah had organized this whole trip, a last hurrah before she moved to Denver for her new job. We'd been friends since college, the kind of tight-knit group that finishes each other's sentences and shares wounds we'd never show anyone else. How much further? Rachel asked, finally giving up on her phone. Maybe another hour, Jake said. We'll have plenty of time to set up, swim, eat, and head back before dark. The road had deteriorated from paved highway to gravel to what could generously be called a trail. Sagebrush scraped against the sides of the Suburban, and the suspension groaned with every pothole. The sun hung heavy in the western sky, painting everything in shades of amber and shadow. That's when we heard it, a sound like a gunshot. The car lurched violently to the right. Jake fought with the steering wheel, his knuckles white as we skidded to a stop in a cloud of red dust. "Everyone okay?" he asked, breathing hard. We nodded, shaken. Marcus had dropped his sketchbook. Rachel's hand was pressed against her chest. Sarah had pulled out her earbuds, eyes wide. Jake stepped out to assess the damage and the rest of us followed. The heat hit like a physical wall. It had to be over 100 degrees. The tire wasn't just flat. It had shredded completely, rubber hanging in twisted strips from the rim. "Must have hit something sharp," Jake said, crouching down. He pointed to a jagged piece of rusted metal half buried in the dirt. It looked like part of an old farm implement, tooth-shaped and vicious. "Please tell me you have a spare," Rachel said. "Course I do. I'm not an idiot." Jake moved to the back and opened the cargo area. His confident expression faltered. "Okay, so, funny story, Jake." Sarah's voice carried a warning. "The spare's here. It's flat too. I forgot to check it before we left." The silence that followed was broken only by the wind whistling through the sagebrush. "How far back was the last town?" Marcus asked quietly. 40 miles, give or take," Jake said, refusing to meet our eyes. Rachel checked her phone again, holding it up toward the sky like an offering to uncaring gods. Still no signal. Nothing. I surveyed our surroundings. We were in a shallow valley between two ridges, the kind of place that looked the same in every direction. The trail we'd been following was barely visible, already being reclaimed by the desert. In the distance, maybe a quarter mile away, I could see a dark line of cottonwood trees, Dead Man's Creek, presumably. "Okay, let's not panic," Sarah said, slipping into her natural leadership role. "It's only 3:30. Someone will come along eventually." "When's the last time we saw another car?" Marcus asked. Nobody answered because we all knew. It had been over 2 hours. "We have water, food, and each other," Sarah continued. "We'll wait here a couple hours. If nobody comes, we'll reassess." So we waited. Jake tried to fix the spare with a patch kit that proved useless on a tear that size. Rachel walked up and down the trail in both directions, phone held high, hunting for even a single bar of service. Marcus sketched. Sarah and I laid out the picnic supplies in the narrow strip of shade beside the Suburban, though neither of us felt much like eating. The sun crawled across the sky with agonizing slowness. The temperature began to drop as afternoon stretched toward evening, but not in the gradual way you'd expect. It plummeted suddenly, like someone had opened a freezer door. Within minutes, I went from sweating to shivering. "That's weird," Sarah said, rubbing her arms. "It's still 2 hours until sunset." She was right. The sun was still visible, but the warmth had been sucked out of the air. Our breath began to mist. "Desert gets cold at night," Jake offered, but his voice lacked conviction. That's when Rachel came running back from her signal hunt, moving faster than I'd ever seen her move. Her face was pale despite the exertion. "There's something up there," she gasped, pointing back the way she'd come. "On the ridge. It was watching me." "What kind of something?" Jake asked. "Coyote? Mountain lion?" "I don't know. It was big. Bigger than a person. It was just standing there, completely still. Probably just a rock formation," Jake said. "Desert plays tricks on your eyes." "I know what a rock looks like, Jake." Rachel's voice pitched higher. "This moved. When I looked away and looked back, it was closer." We all turned to look at the ridge she'd indicated. The sun was behind it now, turning everything into silhouettes and shadows. I couldn't see anything unusual, just the jagged outline of rocks and scattered vegetation. "Let's stay together," Sarah said. "We'll keep the car between us and that ridge. Marcus, you and Jake see if there's anything useful in the camping supplies. Rachel, help me with the food. We might be here a while." As we worked, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The back of my neck prickled. I kept glancing over my shoulder at that ridge, searching for movement, for something out of place. The sun touched the horizon and the temperature dropped further. Marcus found an old blanket in the back of the Suburban that smelled like motor oil and campfire smoke. We huddled together, eating granola bars and beef jerky without much appetite. That's when we heard it. A sound carried on the wind that might have been a coyote howl but lasted too long, slid too far down the register, ended in something almost like words. What the hell was that? Jake's bravado had finally cracked. The sound came again, closer this time, from somewhere past the creek. In the dying light, the cottonwood trees looked less like a refuge and more like a dark wall hiding something we didn't want to see. "We should get in the car," Marcus said. "Lock the doors." "It's just an animal," Jake protested, but he was already moving toward the driver's door. We piled into the Suburban. Jake tried the engine, but it wouldn't turn over. The battery was dead from sitting with the electrical system on while Rachel had been charging her phone earlier. We sat in the gathering darkness, breath fogging the windows, watching the landscape disappear into shadow. The creek was invisible now, but I could hear water running. Strange, because it had been silent all afternoon. "Does anyone else hear that?" I whispered. They did. We all did. The sound of water rushing over stones, getting louder, as if the creek was rising, though there'd been no rain. Then the handprints appeared. Sarah saw them first, her sharp intake of breath drawing our attention to her window. There, pressed against the glass from the outside, was a perfect handprint. Fingers too long, too thin, spreading wider than any human hand should. As we watched in frozen horror, another appeared on Jake's window. Then mine. Then Marcus's. They were all facing inward, as if something had been pressed up against the car, looking in at us. "Nobody move," Jake whispered, though none of us could have moved if we'd wanted to. Our muscles had turned to stone. The handprints began to slide down the windows, leaving trails of something that looked black in the darkness, drawing symbols and shapes that hurt to look at directly. Then came the screaming. It started at 9:47 p.m. exactly. I know because I was staring at my watch, trying to focus on anything except those crawling handprints. The scream came from right outside Sarah's window, a sound of such pure agony and despair that it bypassed our ears and went straight into our bones. Sarah screamed back, scrambling away from her door, climbing over me to get to the middle of the car. We all pressed together in the center of the Suburban, away from the windows as the screaming circled us. Sometimes one voice, sometimes many, sometimes speaking in languages we didn't recognize but somehow understood. They were calling us. They wanted us to come to the creek. "Don't look at them," Marcus said, his voice steady despite his shaking hands. "Don't acknowledge them. Don't respond." "What are they?" Rachel sobbed, her whole body trembling. "I don't know, but whatever you do, stay in the car," Marcus urged. But Rachel wasn't listening anymore. The fear had consumed her rational mind. Her eyes were wild, unfocused, her breathing rapid and shallow. The faces kept appearing at the windows, pale, distorted things with mouths stretched impossibly wide, pressing against the glass, their breath fogging it from the outside though they shouldn't have breath at all. I can't do this," Rachel gasped. "I have to get out. I have to run." "Rachel, no." Sarah grabbed for her arm, but Rachel was already moving. In one fluid motion born of pure panic, Rachel unlocked the passenger door and threw it open. The cold air that rushed and carried the smell of stagnant water and rot. "Rachel!" we all screamed in unison. But she was already running, her silhouette disappearing into the darkness toward the creek. We could hear her footsteps pounding against the hard desert floor, her panicked breathing, her voice crying out as she ran. "We have to go after her." Sarah was already reaching for her door handle. "No." Jake grabbed her. "That's what they want. They want us all out there. We can't just leave her." We sat frozen in horrible indecision, listening to Rachel's retreating footsteps. Then we heard her scream, different from the screams that had been circling us. This was pure terror, raw and human. Then the creek sounds changed. The gentle rushing became a roar, like a flash flood, though the sky was clear. Rachel's screams rose above it, closer now, as if she'd reached the water. What happened next, I can only piece together from what Rachel told us later, in those first shell-shocked hours when she could still form words. She had run blindly through the darkness, branches tearing at her clothes and skin, her only thought to get away from the suburban and the things surrounding it. In her panic-addled mind, she thought if she could just reach the creek, she could follow it out, that water meant civilization, meant escape. But Dead Man's Creek wasn't salvation. When Rachel burst through the cottonwood trees, she found herself on the bank of what should have been a small desert stream. Instead, the creek had swollen impossibly, black water churning and frothing, wider than any creek had a right to be. And in that water she saw them. Bodies. Dozens of them, hundreds maybe, floating just beneath the surface. Some were fresh, clothes still intact, eyes still open and staring. Others were little more than skeletons held together by scraps of leathery skin and rotting fabric. Cowboys in period clothing. Native Americans in traditional dress. Spanish conquistadors in rusted armor. Prospectors with gold pans still clutched in bony hands. Modern hikers in REI gear. A woman in a 1950s dress, pearls still around her neck. A child holding a teddy bear. All of them reached up toward her with waterlogged hands. Rachel screamed and stumbled backward, but the bank gave way beneath her feet. She plunged into the freezing water and immediately, hands grabbed her. So many hands. They pulled her down into the black depths where the water tasted of copper and decay. She said she could hear them whispering, all the dead, their voices overlapping, telling her their stories. The rustler who had given the creek its name, mad with thirst, had drunk deeply of this cursed water and never stopped drinking, never stopped drowning. Every person who died searching for this place, who perished of thirst in sight of water they could never safely drink, was bound here. The creek was their grave and their eternal prison, and now they wanted her to join them, to stay, to add her voice to their chorus. Rachel fought with every ounce of strength she had. She kicked and clawed, pushed away the grasping hands, forced herself upward even as they pulled her down. Her lungs burned. Her vision darkened. She could feel her clothes tearing away, feel cold fingers wrapping around her ankles, her wrists, her throat. But something in her refused to give up. Some core of survival instinct that wouldn't let her become another floating corpse in that terrible water. With a final desperate surge, she broke the surface, gasping and choking. The hands released her all at once. She dragged herself onto the bank, coughing up black water that tasted like grave dirt. When she could finally stand, she ran again, not knowing which direction, just away from the creek. Branches whipped her face. She fell repeatedly, her hands and knees torn and bleeding, but she kept getting up, kept running. Behind her, she could hear them following, not fast but inexorable. The rustling of many feet through dry brush. The whisper of voices calling her name, telling her to come back, that she belonged to the creek now, that she'd tasted its water and there was no escape. Back at the Suburban, we sat in agonized silence, listening to Rachel's distant screams grow fainter. Sarah was crying. Marcus had his eyes closed, hands clasped so tight his knuckles were bone white. Jake stared straight ahead at nothing, jaw clenched. Then, as suddenly as everything had begun, it stopped. The faces vanished from the windows. The handprints faded. The unnatural cold lifted slightly. Even the sound of the swollen creek diminished back to its normal murmur. "What does that mean?" Sarah whispered. Did they get her?" Jake tried the engine, not really expecting it to work. It roared to life on the first try. "We're going after her," he said, his voice allowing no argument. He threw the Suburban into drive, not caring about the shredded tire, and we lurched forward, bouncing wildly over the rough terrain. Jake turned on the high beams and we scanned the darkness desperately for any sign of Rachel. "There." Marcus pointed. For just a moment we caught a glimpse of movement in the brush off to our right, something pale and running. But it disappeared before we could be sure. Jake continued forward, following the trail as best he could in the dark. The rim of the wheel threw sparks whenever it hit rock, but he didn't slow down. We called Rachel's name out the windows, our voices hoarse with fear and desperation. The trail began to climb, winding up and out of the valley. We passed the spot where Rachel had seen the figure on the ridge earlier. Nothing was there now, but we could all feel eyes watching us leave. After what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, the trail widened. Then gravel appeared. Then blessed and miraculous pavement. The smooth road felt like crossing into another world, though we were still miles from anywhere. Jake didn't stop. He kept driving, faster now that we were on pavement, the engine screaming as he pushed it harder than it was meant to go. The damaged tire thumped rhythmically, a countdown to when it would finally give out completely. We'd been on the paved road for maybe 15 minutes when Sarah suddenly screamed, "Stop!" Jake slammed on the brakes and we all lurched forward against our seatbelts. There, caught in the headlights in the middle of the road, was a figure. Rachel. She stood swaying, her arms raised, waving frantically. Her clothes were torn to tatters, hanging off her in strips. Even from a distance, we could see she was covered in mud and blood, her hair matted, her face scratched and bruised. But she was alive. Jake accelerated toward her, and the moment we reached her, we all piled out. Rachel collapsed into Sarah's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. She was ice cold despite the warm night air, and she smelled of stagnant water and something else, something ancient and wrong. "I got out," she kept repeating. "I got out. I got out." We wrapped her in the motor oil blanket and helped her into the back seat. She couldn't stop shaking. When we tried to ask her what happened, she just shook her head violently, her eyes wide and unfocused. "Later," Marcus said quietly. "Let's just get her somewhere safe first." Jake drove. We didn't speak. Rachel sat between Sarah and me, gripping our hands so hard it hurt, occasionally whimpering when we hit a bump or turned too sharply. Her eyes kept darting to the windows, as if expecting to see those pale faces pressed against the glass again. The desert stretched endlessly in all directions, lit only by our headlights and the cold moon above. Every shadow seemed to hide something. Every rock formation looked like a crouching figure. Time lost meaning in that liminal space between the creek and civilization. Then, like a beacon, we saw lights ahead. Redemption. The gas station's fluorescent lights had never looked so beautiful. Jake pulled up to the air pump and we all sat for a moment, unable to quite believe we'd made it. The mundane sight of a 24-hour convenience store, the smell of diesel fuel, the soft ding of the bell when someone opened the store's door, it all felt like heaven. The attendant came out, a leathery old man with eyes that had seen too much desert in too many years. He looked at our Suburban with its shredded tire and spark-scored rim. Then his gaze moved to us as we climbed out, lingering on Rachel's torn clothes and haunted expression. "You folks come from Dead Man's Creek?" he asked. We nodded, too exhausted to be surprised that he knew. "Happened to you too then?" It wasn't a question. His weathered face showed no shock, only a deep, weary sadness. "Happens to someone every few years. Folks don't believe the warnings, think the name's just for show." He shook his head slowly. "Creek's been cursed since before it had a name. Native folks knew it. Spanish explorers learned it. Mexicans learned it. Now it teaches the lesson to anyone foolish enough to ignore it." What were those things?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The old man's eyes grew distant. "The thirsty dead. This desert takes and takes, and that creek's where it keeps what it takes. Every soul that died searching for water in this godforsaken land, they all end up there eventually, bound to the very water they died seeking." He looked directly at Rachel, who flinched under his gaze. "You went in, didn't you? You touched the water." Rachel nodded, a tiny, terrified movement. The old man sighed. That's a heavy burden to carry. The creek will remember you now. You got out, which is more than most can say. But a part of you will always be there, and a part of it will always be with you. What does that mean? I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. Means she's marked. Means on certain nights, when the moon is dark and the desert is quiet, she might hear them calling. Might see them in mirrors and windows. Might dream of drowning in black water. He paused. But she's alive, and that's what matters. The creek wanted her, but she was strong enough to refuse it. That counts for something. We stood in silence, absorbing his words. Rachel had started crying again, quiet tears streaming down her face. The old man helped us change the tire. Jake had a spare after all, properly inflated, in a compartment we'd somehow missed in our earlier panic. As we worked, the old man told us more. Creek wasn't always cursed, they say. Once it was just water, clean and pure. But something happened there long before white men came. Something dark. The land has a memory, you see. Violence and death, they seep into the earth like blood. And once a place has tasted enough death, it develops an appetite. How do we stop it? Marcus asked. How do we keep it from happening to other people? The old man smiled grimly. You can't. Been tried before. County put up warning signs, people tear them down or ignore them. Rangers tried to close the area. Folks just go around the barriers. See, the creek is patient. It can wait decades between feedings if it has to. And there's always someone who doesn't believe, who thinks they're smarter or luckier than everyone who came before. He finished tightening the last lug nut and stood, wiping his hands on an oil-stained rag. Best you can do is tell your story. Warn folks when you can. And never ever go back. Not for anything. We paid for the tire repair and some bottles of water. The old man refused payment for his labor. Just pass it on, he said. Help someone else when you get the chance. As we prepared to leave, he called out one last time. Girl, he said to Rachel, you got any salt at home? Rachel nodded, confused. Salt and iron. Keep them by your doors and windows. Old protections, but they work. And if you hear them calling, you light a candle and you pray. Doesn't matter to who or what, just pray. Sometimes that's enough to keep them at bay. We drove through the night, this time heading east toward Phoenix. Jake and Marcus took turns at the wheel. We stopped once for gas and once when Rachel got sick on the side of the road, her body finally rejecting the creek water she'd swallowed. Dawn broke as we reached the outskirts of Phoenix, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. In the morning light, with the city's familiar sprawl around us, the night's horrors seemed impossible. A shared nightmare. A stress-induced hallucination. But Rachel's torn clothes were real. The scratches on her face and hands were real. And when Marcus opened his sketchbook, we saw that he'd been drawing during those awful hours in the Suburban. The pages were filled with images that made our stomachs turn. The pale faces, the impossible handprints, and worst of all, a sketch of the creek with its carpet of floating dead reaching upward. We took Rachel to the emergency room. She was treated for hypothermia, despite the warm night. She had minor lacerations and severe bruising. The doctor asked how she'd gotten into water cold enough to cause hypothermia in the middle of the Arizona desert in June. We had no answer that would make sense. They kept her overnight for observation. The rest of us stayed in the waiting room, drinking terrible coffee, jumping at shadows, unable to shake the feeling that something was watching us even here, in this bright, sterile hospital surrounded by people and life and normalcy. Rachel was released the next morning. She'd barely spoken since we'd found her on the road. The doctor said she was in shock and recommended therapy. We all knew no therapist would understand what she'd been through. What we'd all been through. We drove her home to her apartment in Tempe. Before we left her, she grabbed each of us in turn, holding on like she was drowning and we were life preservers. "Don't leave me alone," she whispered to Sarah. "Please. I can still hear them." Sarah stayed with her that first week. Then we took turns, rotating through so Rachel was never by herself. We helped her line her doors and windows with salt, though we felt foolish doing it. We sat with her through the nightmares that came every time she closed her eyes. Slowly, over weeks and then months, Rachel began to heal. The physical wounds faded to scars. The psychological ones took longer. She started therapy, though she never told her therapist the truth. How could she? She talked around it, about fear and trauma and a bad experience in the desert, and the therapist gave her coping mechanisms for PTSD. Sarah never moved to Denver. She couldn't leave Rachel, not after what happened. The job would come around again, she said. Friends were more important. We stayed close, the five of us, bound together by that night in a way we'd never been before. We never spoke about it directly, but it was always there between us, in the way we'd all flinch at the sound of running water, in how none of us could stand to be alone after dark, in Rachel's habit of checking every mirror before entering a room. Marcus burned his sketches from that night. He said he couldn't stand to look at them anymore, that they gave him nightmares. But I know he kept one, a drawing of the five of us in the Suburban before it all started, when we were still whole and unafraid. He keeps it folded in his wallet as a reminder of who we used to be. Jake sold the Suburban. Couldn't stand to drive it anymore. He said every time he got behind the wheel, he could feel the steering wheel pulling left, trying to turn back toward Dead Man's Creek. As for me, I moved to Seattle a year later, as far from the desert as I could get. I tell myself it's because I got a good job offer, because I wanted a change of scenery, because the Pacific Northwest has always called to me. But the truth is, I needed to be somewhere green, somewhere water means life instead of death, somewhere the rain comes down clean and pure from the sky instead of bubbling up from cursed ground. But even here, 3 years and 1,000 miles away, I'm not free of it. On moonless nights, when the rain drums against my windows, I sometimes hear other sounds beneath it. Whispers. Voices calling my name in languages I don't speak but somehow understand. And sometimes, when I'm in the shower with my eyes closed, just for a moment, the water tastes like copper and grave dirt. Rachel calls me every few weeks. She's doing better, she says. The nightmares are less frequent now. She started dating someone, another survivor of trauma who doesn't ask too many questions about her scars. She's even thinking about going camping again, somewhere far from Arizona, somewhere with rangers and cell service and lots of other people around. But she still keeps salt by her doors. She still can't look at mirrors without checking over her shoulder. And she still has that distant look in her eyes sometimes, like she's listening to something the rest of us can't hear. The old man at the gas station was right. Rachel got out, but a part of her will always be there. And maybe that's true for all of us who survived that night. We're marked. We're changed. We carry Dead Man's Creek with us wherever we go. Sometimes I wonder about the others, all those people the old man said had come before us, all the ones who didn't make it out. Are they still there, floating in that black water, reaching up toward the surface? Do they remember who they were, or has the creek taken even that from them? And I wonder late at night when sleep won't come, if we really did escape. Or if we're just living on borrowed time, if the creek is patient, if it's waiting for us to let our guard down, to forget the terror, to think we're safe. Because sometimes I swear I can feel it pulling at me. Like a tide, like gravity, like a hook in my soul. Calling me back. Reminding me that I left something unfinished in that cursed valley. The desert remembers. The water remembers. And Dead Man's Creek is always thirsty. The end. If you enjoyed this story, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications for more true-style horror stories like this.